What's more terrifying, a shark attack or public speaking? Find out today when we sort everyone's biggest fears into a tier list. What's up, everyone? I've got an exciting new tier masters for you guys today, and we're going to be looking at the most terrifying phobias. The way we're going to do this is we're going to rank it, S being the most common and scariest, and moving down to F, maybe some rarer stuff or things that aren't scary in general. So the first up on our list is aliens, and this is a fear that can be a little bit passive, maybe the idea of visitation of aliens, but I really think most people who are just constantly afraid of aliens are conspiracy theorists. So I think this is a D tier phobia. Fear of being laughed at. This is for more socially anxious people, but at the end of the day, people can just be jerks, and so you can kind of justify being laughed at, so I don't think this goes very high on the list. I'm going to stick it in C tier. Fear of being naked. While it is terrifying to have a nightmare of that happening, the actual odds of you unintentionally doing this in public are very low, so I think it goes in D. Being stared at. There are certainly some horror movies that delve into this concept where people are being spied on by hidden cameras or neighbors across the street. And while this isn't something that's immediately terrifying, it can cause a lot of paranoia. So I think I'll put it in C as well. So blood is something that can be associated with gore and death. And while just seeing blood itself may not be the biggest thing to be afraid of in general, the things you oftentimes find it with can make it a little bit more scary. So weighing those factors in, I'm putting it in B. I feel like for 99% of the population, bridges are a no factor when it comes to fears. However, for that tiny bit of the population, it can be extremely terrifying, feeling like they're trapped on a bridge with heights or water or who knows what below. But that's probably a pretty rare fear, so I'm going to put it in F. Fear of being buried alive kind of goes into the claustrophobia branch of things. It certainly isn't a common occurrence, but it is kind of terrifying. So for that, it's going in B. I would think for most people, cemeteries are considered pretty creepy, but they're not really downright scary until you go at night or alone. So just factoring everything in, this is probably a C tier. I'm not afraid of clowns, but I know a lot of people that are. Especially after that trend that happened a few years ago where people would dress up as killer clowns and go stalk neighborhoods at night. This can definitely be seen as pretty creepy. I'm putting this in S tier. Fear of crowds is something that goes partially in the social anxiety arena and partially belongs in the claustrophobia side of things. You can definitely feel helpless, and there's times where you could get trampled or lost from your group. Accounting for all those things, and it kind of makes this fear pretty justifiable, so I'm going to put it in A. Fear of darkness is essentially fear of the unknown. What makes this so terrifying is every sound and movement is amplified, and if you're afraid of the dark, your imagination and creativity is just going to make anything that you sense worse. If you're used to it, though, it's not that big of a deal. This is something that most people can get used to pretty quickly, though, gauging from the amount of kids that are afraid of the dark who no longer are afraid when they become adults. So I'm going to put this in A. We're all going to die someday, and that thought troubles some people more than others. Really, the fear of death is just the fear of how much you don't want to lose your loved ones or how much you want to leave a lasting legacy on this earth. It really varies from person to person, so I'm going to put this in B. Deep water may be one of the most terrifying things out there. The big reason for that may just be the helplessness that you might feel if you can't swim or just knowing that there are things out there that can get you. This is no doubt an S tier. I feel like fear of the dentist is pretty rare and it can really stress people out, but I don't know a ton of adults that are really afraid of the dentist. So I'll put this in F tier. I feel like if you know basic fire safety rules and how to prevent and put out potential fires, this is a phobia that can be pretty easily avoided. Maybe this is referring to fear of burning, but I don't know. This is an F tier. While airplanes actually are statistically safer than cars, for those that don't fly very much, it can be a terrifying thing. This is a phobia that's really been built upon by Hollywood, and it's a relatively common fear compared to some others. So I think this goes solidly in B tier. Germs are next up on this list, and I'll probably include getting sick into this. In general, germaphobes are really compared to neat freaks, but I can understand with people that have health issues why they'd be afraid of getting sick. So factoring in that percentage of people, I'm going to put this just above F and D tier. Fear of ghosts really just depends on if you believe in ghosts or not. If you don't, this is an F tier, and if you do, this is probably A or S. I feel like most people probably don't believe in ghosts until they're giving a spooky reason to. So I'm going to put this in C tier. Fear of growing old is somewhat related to fear of death, but the main difference is many times people that have this fear are really just scared of not fulfilling their life wishes. But then again, that fear is something that allows us to put more into life. So I'm going to put this in D tier. Fear of heights is personally my biggest fear. The degrees of this vary greatly, and for many people it doesn't exist at all. There's just something about being so high up that gives you the underlying possibility of you dying from a fall. Because of its realism, this goes in the A tier. This is one of those rare and distinct phobias, and most of the time if you avoid beehives or pictures on the internet, you're going to be fine with this. So I think fear of holes goes in F. Fear of injury can be broad and greatly vary. There are people that work dangerous jobs, and there are serious injuries that require amputation or loss of a body part, and that somewhat makes sense. People are oftentimes afraid of the pain that's associated with this as well, so I'm going to put this in B tier. Everybody loves the good old creepy crawlies. Usually for most people, insects by themselves aren't too bad, but if they see a swarm, people can get really terrified. Overall, I think there are scarier things though, so I'm going to put it in D. Fear of isolation can be pretty scary, but some people actually prefer it. Although if you really think deep down, it is kind of terrifying if you were left to your own thoughts for a really extended period of time. It's not too bad though, but I'll put it in C tier. People who fear loud noises can be on edge, or they might have some sort of PTSD, but I find this more annoying than scary, so I'm putting it in F tier. If it weren't for horror movies, there probably would be no such thing as a fear of mirrors. But that doesn't mean every time you remember a horror movie, you don't want to make sure that the mirror is still acting okay. It's still not realistic though, and this goes in D. There are definitely some people out there who are extremely terrified of needles. I am not one of them, but I can understand why they are. This is somewhat common, and I think it belongs in the B tier. Nightmares. Pretty much all of us have them, and depending on what you're afraid of, there's no telling what might happen in your dream. This is going to go solidly in the A tier spot. Unlucky numbers are mostly going to bother people that are extremely superstitious, but it's somewhat like ghosts where it can only affect you if you believe in that, so I'm also going to put it in C. I don't really know anybody that's afraid of open spaces, but I'd imagine it's kind of the inverse of crowds. But the world's a big place, and I don't know too many people who are really bothered by this, so I'm putting this in F. Fear of poison probably belongs in the realm of paranoia, unless you're someone who tends to work with chemicals a lot. I don't think this is too special, so it's going in D. There are a ton of people who are extremely afraid of public speaking. For those people, it can really be difficult to try and break that fear and get valuable experience without embarrassing yourself. I'm going to put this in S tier. For people who aren't used to large, mean swarms of rats, they can be awfully terrifying. They're not the average mouse that you would see at a pet store, and they're filthy creatures. So I'm going to put this in B. Fear of AI and robots has somewhat increased due to the technological advances we've made in recent years, and every once in a while you can spur it up by watching some good old Terminator movies. This has its place in the C tier. Depending on where you live, scorpions may be much harder to come by than other critters, and with just how their body's designed and their stingers, they can kind of be terrifying. I think this goes next to rats in B tier. While if you understand the biological behaviors of sharks and are someone who's trained to swim out in the ocean with them, they may not be that terrifying. However, due to their appearance and vicious bite, sharks are probably one of the biggest fears on the planet. I think this is no doubt an S tier. Snakes come in all sorts of sizes, and some are more aggressive than others. I think the scariest part about snakes is they're so quick and can just snap at you without you realizing. Snakes goes in A tier. There is a small portion of our population that is scared of social interaction. However, social interaction can't really be avoided, and eventually you're going to have to face your fears, so I'm putting this in F. So some people are scared of spiders such as black widows, but other people are really afraid more of the tarantulas. For most types of spiders, if you don't do anything harmful to them, they're really harmless to you. They do have a creepy appearance, but they're just overall not that scary. I'm going to put it in C tier. Fear of strangers can definitely be terrifying. It can leave you looking over your shoulder as you're crossing the street, or checking outside your blinds before you're going to go to bed for the night. There's always just something about us that goes, what is that guy doing over there? For that, I'm putting this in A tier. Thunder causes loud noises, and many people, myself included, are afraid of lightning. It's extremely rare for you to actually be affected and hurt by that though, so I think it goes in D tier. Claustrophobia is no doubt one of the most common fears out there, and I know several people that if they get in a tight elevator, they're going to start freaking out. So I'm going to put this in S tier. Tornadoes overall are pretty rare. Although they're pretty fast moving, you can see where they're at. So I'm going to put this in F. The thing about trains is they're loud, fast moving, and dangerous. But because of that, it's hard to really be caught off guard by one. So accounting for that, I don't think it's very scary. I'm going to put it in D tier. While people are afraid of worms, they're not very dangerous and they're very slow moving. You're not really going to find an instance straight out of a horror movie where you're just covered in hundreds or thousands of worms, so I'm putting this in F tier. Alright, that wraps up my list. Let me know what your biggest fear on this list is, and I'll catch you in the next video.